Welcome to the Choose Hard podcast, the one and only fitness and nutrition podcast that goes way beyond just training and nutrition and helps you choose hard every day to help transform your body and your mind. Today on the show, we have, I'm going to read this because there's no way I'm getting it right, even though I'm reading it, Nick Koumalatsos. I think I got that right, man. Apologies if I didn't. I probably didn't, but this is a phenomenal podcast, phenomenal conversation. Man, it really it just hit me hard right in the gut multiple times when he was talking. And this podcast is it's gonna touch on some touchy subjects. It's gonna poke some nerves, and I wanted that. I wanted a podcast that was going to get deep, was gonna talk about a very big problem in today's world, which is weak men and the absurd amount of depression and dependency that men in today's world have, and it is failing our country, it is failing our families, it is failing our lives and the rate of success that we can see as men because there's a lack of leadership. So this podcast specifically is mostly for the men. Women, if you want to listen to it, I think there's plenty of gems in this podcast, and send it to your husbands if you're married, because I think they need to listen to it too. Every guy does, whether he is on top of his stuff with these things or not. But regardless, we're going to talk about Nick's history, growing up a 2-time convicted felon, transitioning from there to get his GED, work his off to eventually get into the Marines, serve 12 years, I believe it was, going overseas, touring, doing all kinds of crazy stuff, coming back, becoming basically an alcoholic, almost committing suicide, and by the grace of God, did not pull that trigger and changed his life for the better, became sober, and started coaching other men on how to change their lives as well, amongst being a father, a husband, a business owner to multiple businesses, and being the leader of multiple communities. This podcast not only touches on those touchy subjects, but it shows a man who went through it all, came out on the other side, grew because of it, and is now teaching others and leading others on how to do the same. This one is going to really, really touch you in a profound way, and I'm excited for you to listen. Please take notes. Give it a second listen if you need to. Let this sink in and make the changes you need to make in order to be the leader you need to be. Without any further ado, let's talk to the one and only Nick Koumalatsos.
The greatest things in life all start with a challenge.
You must accept that everything is hard before it gets easy.
Everything you want in life begins with a hard path.
All right, man. So the first thing I really want to just start this with is, in a nutshell, describe yourself. What do you tell people when, who is Nick? What does he do? Kind of fill us in just so people can get just a broad scope. And then I'm going to just kind of pick apart your story and really, really show people who you are as we go.
That's an interesting question that we talk about a lot because you ever heard the Bob Proctor's whole thing about who you are?
I haven't.
Oh, it's great, man. And I think a lot of people struggle with that and realizing they're like, I don't know who I am. And they're like, well, I'm Nick. Well, no, you're not Nick because someone picked that name for you. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm this. Well, no, you were born a dude. You didn't get to choose that either. So then who are you really? And I think for me, man, it just comes down to my why, and what really moves me is I'm this grown kid who comes from an immense amount of perseverance. And our struggle, or adversity, comes from immense amount of adversity, and had to persevere through a lot of different things. And in a lot of ways, that has shaped me into the man that I am today, in my core values of prioritizing the intentionality of being a father, and leaning into having an elite level marriage, and seeing the things that really matter the most in life when you strip away all of the BS, all of the hard work and the grind and all that kind of stuff that people say as an entrepreneur. And I'm right there with it. I mean, I think that my fear of being unsuccessful is going back to being poor and going back to this, getting my clothes from Goodwill with lice in them. And there's a lot that drives me there. But at the same time, I've had this fortunate ability to, through, I guess, life and experience, seeing what's really freaking important. And, you can make millions of dollars, but if you don't have your life squared away and your priorities squared away, it means nothing. it means nothing. And I say this thing all the time, is like, what is it worth to get to the finish line and cross this amazing finish line, this business exit or whatever it is, but you're alone and you've left your family behind. And so that's something that I would say I've figured out that that's a priority, but I wouldn't say it's something that I talk a lot about that with my wife now. I'm like, I know what it matters. You know what I mean? I know what matters. So it's like this, this delayed gratification fight between building something of substantial that's going to create generational wealth for generations to come, and living in the now and trying to balance that. I think a lot of guys, fight that. But as far as who I am, it's kind of a beautiful thing to know who you are and what makes you tick. And when you figure that out, man, there's such an immense amount of peace that you get with that. And it's like, that'd be cliche. It's like, I'm just a dude, man. I'm a dude that has all the same problems as everybody else. I just refuse to allow myself to have excuses about them. And I want to keep my priorities straight, which what matters most.
Do you know who Donald Miller is? Author
No.
of Building a Story Brand.
I do. I didn't know the name, but yeah, I know. It's a great book. Both books that he came out with on that subject, great.
Really good. I was listening to an interview with him and Stephen Furtick, and he was talking about a retreat he went to in Tennessee. And a part of it is you have to remove your phone, and you cannot tell anybody what your name is, and you cannot tell anybody what your profession is. So they strip you of what you think is your identity to an extent. Right? And he said it was one of the most eye-opening things, and it gave him so much more anxiety than he realized, because he wanted to tell people what he did for a living, because that's what he valued in himself most, and he didn't realize that until going through that. And it was pretty eye-opening even just to listen to that. But I love that you started this without saying, I am a fitness coach or I am this role or anything like that, because we are so much more, right? I have before I get into more of your background, which I have planned things for, I want to ask you a couple questions based on how you introed yourself. Number one, what do you do by trade? Just so people have context there. What would you say you do by trade?
This is funny. So it's funny because I don't even talk about it anymore because I mean, you probably came across my book. I wrote a book about leaving the Marine Corps as communicated warrior. Yeah. And that was the big identity shift, right? Like losing that and really, I was actually just writing an email about one of the worst nights of my life. I learned that what you do is not your identity. It's just what you do. And so anyways, sorry, go to the question again. That was great.
What do you do by trade?
What do I do by trade? I sell soap. I'm a soap salesman. Legitimately, I'm the CEO of one of the fastest growing organic grooming companies called Johnny Slicks. It's an amazing brand, and I think it's just booming. We have a great team. We're truly changing the world in our own small way. All American-made manufacturing, all organic, all raw ingredients sourced right here in the United States. We do all of our own fulfillment, our own manufacturing, providing jobs to Americans in our local area. So that's one thing that I do. My day job, and then I'm a managing partner of a hormone replacement nationwide clinic called Core Medical Group. I've been with them for almost 8 years now. And dude, we've just changed so many men's lives with balancing out hormones and blood work and optimizing their health and getting them, really legitimately saving people's life, like myself. That's it came out of my own story there. And then finally, I have a men's community that, that started, in 2018 off of a ask. And it's just evolved into something, amazing, and it's changed every year, and it will continue to change every year. But the guys that we have in there, we have guys in there that have been here the whole time. They've been there since the beginning. It's wild. but you are who you surround yourself with, and so I'm proud to be a part of that community itself. Yeah,
I love it. How old do you have? One kid, two?
I have three.
Three.
I'm working on another one.
Love it.
Yeah.
How old is your oldest?
23.
Okay. Could you say that you had? I mean, I was going to ask if you had an appreciable amount of success when you had your first kid, but the reason I'm asking is because you talked about coming from
Definitely
a lot
not.
of it. Okay. So,
20 years old. I remember holding this little baby girl who I just thought was like immediately I was in love with. I mean, you know the feeling, like you have that baby, you just look, you're like, you are the most beautiful, amazing creature I've ever seen in my entire life. And realizing that like some things had, like, it was time for me to grow up.
Yeah.
And I definitely did not get everything right, because you got to think like you're a starter baby. Well, I'm a starter dad. And it's very different now that I have a 4-year-old. You know what I mean? I'm the second go around of this thing is much different than the first go around. But yeah,
I'm sure you would say the answer is yes to this, but so I'm just going to go ahead and assume going through struggles at an early age, going through adversity, going through shopping at Goodwill and having to pick out lice and all that stuff, going through, I'm sure, plenty more through the military and stuff, which we'll dig into soon. Shapes you into the person you are, right? The struggles, like being broken down, is what builds you up, and the struggles you go through is what helps you create the characters you need for success. How do you instill those into your children when you know your children don't have to shop at Goodwill, don't have to go through those struggles? And as a father, you don't want them to. You do everything you can to make sure they don't, but at the same time, that's what helped shape you. How do you instill that?
Yeah, it's a catch-22, right? Because as a parent, our knee-jerk reaction is to do things for them, right? To keep them safe. Our job is to keep them safe. And the reality is, they need a little bit of danger in their life. They need a little bit of failure. And so one of the biggest things that I do, and I have to, I don't want to say I get on to my wife, but I'm like, I as a man in the house, I'm like, no, he's going to do it himself. I don't do everything for him. I just don't. And people sometimes can look at that as like neglectic, but Jordan Peterson has a really great talk on parents who are, if you look at young parents, they're neglectic in some way, right? Because they're kind of like oblivious, or they're just focused on their own selves. But what happens to those kids? They grow up more self-resilient and reliant on themselves, right? And if you look at the way I grew up, I mean, I grew up with a single mom and my brother, and we were left to our own devices at the ages of like 5 and like under.
Yeah.
They were like, I mean, this is like the mid 80s, like 1985, you'll be all right, kid. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that was normal. And so I think there's this loop where you don't have, and I talk about this with adults now, but it happens early on with children. People are like, well, I don't have the confidence to do the thing. Well, you're never going to have confidence to do the thing. You need courage to do the thing. Once you have courage and then you do the thing, you get the experience, which creates the confidence, and then you go back in the same loop, right? But people never start. But I think that when you, back in that generation of those times, you were doing stuff so much, and you were just out on your own playing outdoors. And I mean, like, dude, it was kind of crazy, man. Like, there's some places that we went as kids and growing up that I'm like, my mom had no idea where I was at. And I was doing some really shady, dangerous things. That reminds me of, what was the, Stand By Me, the movie of the kids in the railroad tracks and they find the dead body?
I think so.
Yeah. Great movie, but it was like that. It's like we're like Goonies kids with the neighborhood. You know what I mean? We're just off. But I think that that's what made that portion of the whatever you call it, whatever generation that was, Gen X, early 80s, 70s, made them so resilient and have grit, because we were raised in that. right? So when it comes to my kids now, I put them into situations, and I didn't do this with my older girls. And I talk about that with them. I'm like, yeah, I kind of failed you guys on a couple departments. You know what I mean? That's what you get for having a starter dad. But now there's a great book called The Intentional Father, and I don't think I have it.
I've heard of it.
Great book, Christian-based book, small, but nonetheless, I highly suggest every father read The Intentional Father. But that's really what it's about at this stage is being that intentional father, and everything you do with intention, whether you do something or don't do something. Like I really force my kid to have struggles, and to, if like trying to pick his bike up over a curb to put it on the porch, it's like, no, dude, like we're gonna stand here and you're gonna fight through this because I'm not gonna do it for you.
Yeah.
And the easy thing is just like to grab the bike and put it on there, but that you just rob that kid of his confidence. You just rob that kid of learning that he can do it himself. And I was on a coaching call with my community. We were talking about this, and I had a client in town, and they piped up and they said, "Hey, just so you know, Nick's not BSing. Like I've witnessed this myself because the other client's spouse was going to jump in and help my son." And I was like, "Whoa!" I was like, "No, he's got it." He's like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "He's got it." So they've witnessed this, like, and it is hard to watch. It's hard to watch them fall and get hurt. It's hard to watch them do these things. But man, if you would meet my son, you would be like, this kid is a different creature. He is the most, I'm like, dude, you're awesome. You're a warrior. He goes, I know. He goes, yeah. Like his self-confidence is almost too high. We've had him in jiu-jitsu since we had him in a toddler program when he was 2 years old, learning how to do, just basic moves in jiu-jitsu twice a week. So he's been in that for almost 3 years now, but that's the reason why is you have to you protect your kids. Yes. But man, you have to allow them to experience failure. You have to allow them to just break down sometimes and to fail. That's because that's what gave us our superpower. This, I wouldn't change one, Cody. I wouldn't change one freaking thing in my life. All of the abuse, the things that happened to me in my past, there's nothing that I would change because every single one of those obstacles, every single one of those struggles has made me the man that I am today. And you take one little thing away and maybe I'm not here. And I'll tell you what, man, I've done so much dang personal growth and work on myself. I like who I am.
I love that. That's so good, man. And it's so true. I think it is hard, and it's hard for people to watch other parents do it. It's hard for the parents themselves to do it. I do the same thing, and sometimes I'll get looks from neighbors, and it's because I know I don't want to give her the easy way out, especially because realistically, it's nothing harmful. It is carrying, like we go on a walk, and she wants to ride the bike, and she doesn't want to push the bike up a hill. Well, sorry, you brought the bike. You got to push up the hill, and I'll cheer you on all the way up. We can take it all day, but it is. They'll thank us later, and we know it. So that's what really matters, But
it goes against that like internal genetic code of how you're created to protect him, right? So it's something that you have to be super aware of, and then you have to be very intentional. I cannot use that word enough. Being very intentional about the way that you parent and the why you do things. And one of the things that we don't say is because. That's another parenting thing. I never say, well, because or because I said so.
Yes.
Because and what we have in our word, we have in our thing, and even him at 3 years old, he was like, I was like, he goes, because, and I'm like, because is a preparatory word for the reason why. So if you say because, you better tell me the reason why. And a lot of parents say, well, because I said so. And they're like, well, I don't have the time to explain. It's like, dude, that kid's asking because why? He's asking the reason why. He's wanting to understand. And if you can't articulate yourself for a moment to tell that young man why you want him to do a specific thing, well, he's not learning anything.
Mm-hmm. It's so true.
And I've made some videos about that, and I've gotten a lot of flack over it. But it's just one of our rules, man. We don't say because I said so. Like if I'm telling him to do something, I better have a reason why I'm telling him, that I can articulate that to him so that he understands why this thing is important. Mm-hmm. Whether it be safety, work, whatever it may be.
I heard somebody else I look up to say to never say because I said so.
Yeah.
And it made sense. And I listened. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And then I caught myself doing it as a
Oh,
parent.
yeah.
And you're like, oh, maybe I do this more than I realize. And so I started really paying attention, and that alone was such a game changer. Because I think, and this is what people don't like about it, is number one, it forces you to actually show up and be a good parent, right? And then two, you'll find that you might just be a lazy parent. So if a kid wants to do something or have fun or play with, and you don't feel like it, you'll say, because I said so. But if it's just because you are tired, you're fatigued, you're bored, you're whatever, and you won't spend time playing with the kid, like, check yourself, right? And I've had to do that.
Actually, it's like, matter of fact, I don't know why I'm saying no. I don't have a good reason. You know what I mean? Maybe it is because I'm lazy. Like you got to have a reason and what's great is, I don't remember exact scenario, but I did say something and he asked me why. And I said, you know what, son, I don't have a good reason. So let's go somewhere. Let's do something else. You know what I mean? And I couldn't articulate myself, and that caught me. And if you think about that, if you're grown up that way, you're creating an individual who is a thinker and a questioner, not just a sheep in the herd.
Yep.
And I don't know about everybody else, but I would want my children to make their own decisions based off what's in the best interest of them and theirs, not the herd.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what brought you to the military? Like, how did that come about? And then just a brief, like, what, how and what you served in the military, so we can have some context there before I kind of get into the post-military story, because I know you have different chapters of this story.
So I'll try to keep it real short. So I convicted felon, 2-time convicted felon by the time I was 13 years old. And then went through this whole, like, getting my life cleaned up. By the time I was 15, I was on the straight and narrow, not drinking, not doing drugs, girls, etc., all kinds of stuff. Yeah, I grew up in Florida, so that if anybody understands, like, oh, that makes more sense now. But yeah, 90s, teenager, early 90s. Did a lot of dumb stuff, and then got cleaned up by the time I was 15. And then really went into just focused on making money, putting a lot of my energy into working hard and making money. And by the time I finished the school was a whole deal. Like, I failed and had to go to an alternative school, which was like something out of a rap 90s movie with barbed wire around. And anyways, I escaped that process. But I finished the 10th grade. And then that summer I was working a job, and I was making close to $4,000 legally at this point. I just want to caveat that. Legally, was making close to $4,000 a week. So most 90-something% of it cash. So I was from 6 a.m. to, and that's why I talk a lot about work ethic and the generation now versus then. Like, from 6 a.m. to 2, I was an audiovisual tech for Bay Point Marriott's Convention Center. So I was setting up projectors and lights and microphones and stuff for conventions and things like that. And these big, suite, ballroom suite things for meetings and presentations. And then I would take a 30-minute break, and from 2:30 to 10 o'clock at night, I was a bellman at the same hotel. And that's just cash tips all day long. Yeah. So at the end of the week, you literally could be making $800 to over $1,000 a day. So, and this was what, 96 or 7 or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
And I was making, I want to say $15 an hour at the convention center, which is crazy for that time. And, so I was making a good amount of money. And at one point it was time to go back to school for my 11th grade year. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. I'm not going to talk about photosynthesis 8 hours a day and dissecting frogs and giving this up. No way. I had a house on the beach, had my own life. I had a roommate at the time, but I had my own house, and I'm 17 years old. I'm like, I'm not going back to school so I can sit in a classroom for 8 hours. This doesn't seem like a good business decision. So I worked, and I did that life for a while. And I remember one point I saw the guy, like the lead bellman and the hotel manager, and in my mind they were like ancient. They were probably like younger than I am right now, but in my mind they were like in their 50s or 60s. And I saw my future for like 20, 30 years prior, or in the future, going, oh, that could be my life. And growing up, I was never in the same school for longer than 6 months. My mom moved around. I used to make a joke saying that she moved around like to get away, like she was running from the cops. But in the reality, she was literally just going from job to job, making ends meet, trying to take care of, 2 boys. And so I was used to kind of living on the go and having constant change in my life. And so when I started to get a little stable, and I saw that that could be my future for the next 20, 30 years, granted, I would have been successful in whatever I did and come up, but I'm like, just doing the same thing around the same people for 20, 30 years, I panicked. And I talk about it like how I hit the nuclear button and just blew my life up. Like I quit the jobs, I gave up my place. At first I said, I'm going to go join the military. So I'm going to go join the hardest branch of the military. And at the time, this is before the internet, you know what I mean? I mean, obviously the internet was there, but as it is today.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know anything. So you just knew what was on commercials. And back then the commercial was for the Marine Corps was the dude fighting the dragon. I don't know if you remember that. Have you ever seen that commercial? You have to Google it. It's on YouTube. It looks old and cheesy, but that's what we had on TV, man. I'm like, this dude's fighting dragons like with a sword. I'm in. Sign me up. And so I went and talked to the recruiter, and he did his whole spiel, and told me no. And once he did his whole spiel, once he ran my information, he came back and he was like, I'll never forget his face when he walked back in. And now he's Klein. Michael Klein, he actually retired. He lives up north of this town. So he's actually here, my recruiter. And I remember forget him coming in and looked at me and just shook his head. And he's like, kid, there's no way you're joining the Marine Corps. Not only are you not joining the Marine Corps, you're not joining any branch. You're a 2-time convicted felon and a high school dropout. And I said, so? Like, I'm clean. I'm here. Like, what's the big deal? Like, I want to join. You need people. Let's go. And he's like, it's not going to happen. And when he told me no, that was one of the biggest mistakes he ever met, because I have this toxic trait of this rebellious person. And when you tell me I can't do something, it truly my brain up to where I'm like, okay, I'm going to show you, which is a great thing. It is a great thing, great personality trait. The only reason I say at 43 that I've learned is sometimes maybe I shouldn't do certain things. Maybe I should just accept no and continue on with what I'm doing. Because now that I'm a little bit wiser, I check myself and be like, is that a path that I need to go down? Or do I want to go down it just because someone told me no? Because I can force things to happen. I can force things. If they tell me no, I can make anything happen. I truly believe that. But sometimes they don't need to happen. So anyways, I spent almost 2 years fighting that system, and eventually I got in. I mean, I dropped out. I quit the reason I quit those jobs is I went to started going to college, because the military, they hate high school dropouts, but they love a college dropout. So I got my GED, went to college, and then I was going to drop out after my first semester. And they're like, "Oh, you're a college dropout? Done. Let's go. We'll take you all day." And then I worked nights at a movie theater, minimum wage. Back then, I want to say it was like $4.25. And I remember getting my first check after 2 weeks, making $4,000 a week. And after 2 weeks, I got my check, and it was like $175. And I'm like, what? How do people survive off of this?
Yeah.
And but I kept doing it. Moved in with my grandmother, and for 2 years we just grinded out. Had over 100 letters of recommendation. Had to go to, take the test multiple times, had to take psych evals, and it was a grind, man. And finally I got in. And talking about my life being a perseverance through adversity, I finally get my shot, right? After almost 2 years. At this point, I'm 18 years old. I'm 18 years old. I turned 19 in recruit training, because it had taken that long to get in. So I make my shot. I get there on training day 7. Been there 7 days, maybe 8. I don't know. But on training day 7, I broke my wrist and got dropped. And it was like, damn, dude, like you just can't win. Like, why can't things be easy? And that created a whole chain of events where I wanted to quit and all kinds of stuff. But once I pulled my head out of my and I used it as an opportunity, ended up just driving forward, man. Ended up spending 5.5 months on that island, and really turned pain into purpose. And what I realized once I got over my little pity party is that, well, I'm a criminal. Like, I'm a former criminal. So what I need to do here is I need to learn every single shift. I need to learn how this island works. I need to learn how these drill instructors work, what the training schedules are, what is the knowledge that I need to move forward. And I just gamed the out of the system. And then when I healed back up and got back in there, I ended up being number 1 in the entire company. And no one could even touch me because I just knew the system. I knew all the phases. I knew who went where. I knew what personality was why. And I just did the con man thing and just figured it all out. Learned what I needed to learn, and no one could touch me. And I used my hardship as a way to level up. And that was really one of the first things as like an adult that I'm like, oh, let's make what's the old lemonade out of lemons situation here.
Yeah.
And you can do that you're with anything in life. And anyway, so fast forward, ended up doing that, and then taking selection for force reconnaissance, which at the time, this was before special operations adopted the Marine Corps. That was the top unit in the Marine Corps. Got past that selection process, got added to Second Force, did some time out in Agoge with 3rd Recon, ended up coming back. That's when we stood up special operations and became went through selection again for Marine Special Operations Command, became a Marine Raider, and then over my entire course of deployed Iraq, Afghanistan, all over Southeast Asia, Turkey, all directly in support of the global war on terrorism. And then in 2012, I called it quits. It was time for me to exit.
How many years total was that?
12.
12 years.
Yeah.
Man. And you returned, and what now? I mean, I got to imagine after 12 years, you're a new person. So obviously your identity has shifted in many good ways. But I would assume one of the, not necessarily bad ways, but one of the hard ways is that you identify as a soldier who is deployed. And when you come back, you're no longer a soldier that is deployed. You're just back into the normal world. Like,
yeah.
What did you do at that point? It's
interesting. So I was very bitter, and it's my own fault. I stayed operating. I never did like a break in my 12 years. So, I joined in 2000. 2001 happened. I was at my first duty station when September 11th happened. That changed the course of my entire life. And so I never, and as soon as that happened, I immediately went into this operational mode where I started deploying. I mean, I deployed 1 year exactly after September 11th, and I never stopped. When my daughter was born, my second daughter was born, when she turned 5, I had done 4 deployments by the time she was 5 years old. And I did that up until the year I got out. So out of 12 years, I was gone for 6 years. And because of that, I got very bitter and worn down and started to become a very angry person and started to lose the joy in the job that I was doing. Not to don't get me wrong, I still like doing the job, but I stopped having as much fun as it's the one regret that I tell young people, like what would you what advice would you say? And I was like, dude, listen, like riding motorcycles out of the back of helicopters with guns on and all your friends, like it's kind of a once in a lifetime kind of situation. You know what I mean? When you're riding it, a helicopter lands and you ride your bike off the back of a ramp and you got a bunch of guns on, and it's the they make in the movies, dude. And you don't get that opportunity much in life, right? Very few people get that, and we got that. And as cool as it was, I was very focused on the professionalism of it, as I should be. But I also let a lot of the politics and the BS get to me too much. And my one, I don't have many regrets in life, but the one regret I probably would have just not cared about the politics. Because guess what? I got out in 2012. It's 2025. I go roll with, I do jiu-jitsu with all the young guys that are still at the unit. And guess what? It's the same politics and the same BS. Nothing's changed. Yeah. So I didn't need to worry about it so much. I should have just had fun. You know what I mean? And but the thing is you stay operationally that long and you get burnt out. So I had burnout for a lot of different reasons. Keep in mind those times we were directly in combat the entire time. So it takes a toll on you. It takes a toll on you. And so when I got out, I was telling a friend, I said, "Oh, I'm already transitioned. I'm mentally ready to be out. I want to be a civilian. This is the next chapter of my life." And he just kind of laughed. He said, "All right, bud," because he got out 2 years before me, and he was like, "Yeah, well, just take it slow. You know what I mean? Just ease into it." I'm like, "Oh no, I'm good, man." You're not good. When it comes, and I'm sure you have a lot of law enforcement, probably military and law enforcement people in your community. It is who you are. What you do is who you are. And it's very hard for it not to be that way, because it is, I got out and I was a Force Recon Marine. I was a Marine Raider. Like, that is who I was. That's the neighborhood that I lived in. It was the schools my kids went to. It was the people I hung out with. It was the things I looked up on the internet, the gear, the lifestyle, everything. I mean, it was the lifestyle. And then all of a sudden, and I write about it in my book, talking about that, you turn your badge in. You have to have an access badge to be on the compound. And you turn that badge in and you walk out that door, and that door shuts and you can't get back in. And I remember standing out by the memorial when I walked out going, wow, that's it. That's the culmination of 12 years right there. And it was, and I had opportunity and whatnot, but it was more on the personal side that things started to take a decline, rather rapidly, actually. And within 2 years, man, I was pretty much within a year and a half to 2 years, I was at my lowest. And it really just comes down to your overall health, your hormones, and then your identity. And I didn't know who I was. If I wasn't this Marine Raider, I wasn't this guy who was super fit, and now I was like super unfit, having a host of medical issues, and to be honest, mental issues. Then who is this guy? And then you start going down the lines of like, oh, all of this was for nothing. Like, I was lied to. There is no brotherhood, because the phone stops ringing. Your friends stop because they're all still working. Nick's good. He's making a bunch of money. He's contracted now. He's good. He's already on his next chapter. We don't need to check on him. And the reality is, it was the worst part of my life. But of course you put this face on. Oh, I'm making all this money. Life's good. Blah, 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 blah. Inside, total devastation.
How long did it take for you to make a shift? And when you made that shift, is that what led you into coaching other men?
No. Well, I guess in a way. So I had this opportunity when I got out and people thought that I was doing good. I had this opportunity to start helping some veterans. And this was later on. This was like about a year and a half, 2 years in well, to go back, what really happened was, I had the intentions of committing suicide, one night. That little voice in your head that starts off with, you can sleep in. You've had a hard life. You're out now. Your body's tired. You probably need the rest. So just, sleeping in one day is not going to kill you. Skipping one workout's not going to kill you. You can eat that burger. You put your time in. You know what I mean? It's like you don't have to take that cold shower, except whatever that little thing is that rationalizes you not choosing hard, right? That doing the easy thing, the amygdala that tricks you into keeping you safe. I tell people that voice, while it starts innocent, is the exact same voice that will talk you into taking your own life. And the way that sounds is, you're holding people back. You're the problem. And the voice for me was, I was what's problem with my family. My wife at the time will find somebody else. You are not a good father because you're not there. So she'll get remarried to somebody who's going to be more present for your kids. Right now, you're probably just causing more damage than actual good. Everything that you've lived for is a lie. So you're actually doing people a service by checking out. That's the same voice that tells you that you can have the cookie, that you can skip the cold shower or the cold plunge or doing the workout. It's the same voice. It just starts super small. And it just gets louder and louder and louder and louder. It's a horrible trick of the devil, man.
And you gotta shut the voice up early on.
You gotta shut the voice up early on before it gives it to you, because you can't keep feeding it every time. And I love your choose hard thing, because every time that you choose easy over hard, every single time that you feed that voice, you feed that monster, and it becomes more powerful. So for me, and I talked to a neuroscientist, a doctor, about this. I told him my story, Dr. Brendan Bowerman, who came up with, I don't know if you've ever seen him. He came up with they're treating TBI and post-traumatic stress through a virtual reality system that they developed. And it's about creating new blood flow and pathways to the prefrontal cortex. Because what they're finding is that when people go into this kind of negative mode, or they're starting to have like this fight or flight, or they're suicidal or whatever it may be, they're depressed, there is little to no blood flow in the prefrontal cortex. So you're not thinking clearly. And that's like that's like the straight up, every TBI, post-traumatic stress, there's no blood flow to the prefrontal cortex. So you're basically operating off this like reptilian part of your brain. So I told him my story, and for me, and it's all written out in the book, I went to the beach, and my intention of going to the beach was that it would be an easy cleanup. But so I was like, I live on the beach down here. So, it was just flip-flop shorts and a shirt. I grabbed my gun. I went down there, left my family behind. I had been drinking. And, I was always drinking. So that was just the constant. Went down there. But then at that point, my feet were in the sand. I was hearing the ocean, and come to find out, there's this whole frequency thing with the ocean and then having your feet in the sand that down regulates your fight or flight response. So he was able to explain to me on a scientific level. He goes, honestly, if you would have went anywhere else, if you would have went to a parking lot like of Walmart and sat in your truck, he goes, you probably would have taken your own life. Jeez. He goes, the fact that you took your shoes off and you went to the beach and listened to those waves and had your feet in the sand, he goes, that more than likely saved your life. And my intention for doing it was, and this actually, I just learned this probably about a year ago, after I told him the story. And then he like pulled up all this literature and apps and all this kind of stuff about frequencies and realigning in your head and everything, which I've believed for a long time. And grounding, like now we do grounding sheets and we get all kinds of weird. But nonetheless, I made the decision not to do it because I had all these positive thoughts start to rolling through my head, which again aligns with removing the negative frequencies, realigning your body frequency to the earth. And then so I realized that things were really bad and something had to change. I had zero tools on how to change it and how to improve it. However, I knew that something had to be done. So I went home and, I remember walking in and my wife at the time, my ex-wife, and was like pale as a ghost. Like I think she knew something was up. She was white as a ghost. And I just grabbed the bottle of Maker's Mark and started drinking again. But because that's the only tool I had at the time. And
Yeah.
from that point on, I started to research and to put myself in these really uncomfortable situations and vulnerable situations of therapy. And it was pretty much, I went all in on growth, whatever that looked like. And at the initial part, I really, really started to go to, okay, what veteran therapy programs are out there, and I'll be the guinea pig. And the reason for that is because almost simultaneously I met this man named Carl Munger who was helping veterans, and I had a lot of guys from the teams reach out to me and they're like, "No, Nick, you're being super successful." I was like, well, what we could do is we could start going to some of these events, and I'll introduce you to my network, like these VPs and these presidents and these CEOs of these companies, and we'll just bypass the HR process. Because at the time I was like, well, if I can get a guy like a 6-figure job out of the Marine Corps, like he's good, right? And I didn't realize there was all the personal human being stuff that really needed to be worked on. But that's initially what I was doing at the same time as I was going through all of my therapy stuff. And then I started, me and my friend Josh Hansberger started to really connect the dots on, oh, this is a kind of a human performance problem. This isn't really a veteran problem. This is we need to do some internal work, some internal growth and get rid of the ego and let go of the identity of this thing that we're supposed to be this really badass tough guy. And let's go back to being a human being. Let's go back to being a man and a father and a husband. And let's nail down that. And it wasn't overnight, man. It was years. But I can say that there was a big shift between 14 and 16. And then 16, I went through some personal adversity, and really 16 to 18. 2018 was probably one of the biggest shifts for me. I got really super fit in 2017. So 16, I was still a disaster. But I was working on it. It was a slow start. 17, I got in phenomenal shape for the first time since I've been outside of the military. And then the year after that, I quit drinking completely. So it's been, August will be 6 years. And then it was just, I started paying for coaching for myself, both physically and nutrition wise, both in business and personal growth. I had like four different coaches and 4 different things. So I just went all in on my own personal development, and it was like a rocket ship at that point. It was an absolute rocket ship. Like I started investing, and people said, "Oh, you don't need this and you do that." I was like, dude, they have the information. They have the lessons learned. I'm done with the ego shit. Like, I just want to learn. I just want to make myself better. And man, it challenged me so hard. But that's when, but what's crazy, dude, and you know this better than anyone, when I did that, my businesses exploded. My relationship just got, we were dealing with so much from the past. I've been with my wife now for this October will be 11 years. And we were dealing with so much when we first met because I was just an asshole. I was just a straight hole. So I had to deal with all that. But like when I went all in on myself and coaching and really paying for personal development, everything exploded. Like my whole life turned around. The businesses started. I mean, that's when like we turned nothing into 2 8-figure businesses because of that. And that's it, man. That's it in a nutshell. I was so sorry. It's long-winded. I just went on a rant.
No, that's great, dude. And it's crazy too. To me, this is where like God's preparing you for something. But you think about all that you went through, all that you overcame, and then you started shifting, creating the tools and the practices needed. You changed, and then you got yourself into a position where you can help others change.
Yeah.
Boom. A worldwide pandemic hits, and men are isolated and getting more depressed than ever. But you're prepared to help. It's wild because that literally was perfect timing.
It was perfect timing, right? Yeah.
It is wild. And so obviously that led to, is it, I'm going to butcher it, Agoge?
The Agoge.
Agoge.
Yeah.
First, what does that mean? And then I want to dive into these 4 phases because I'm assuming your crazy transformation and journey and through all this is what helped you and your partner create the 4 phases.
So the Agoge, it's funny. We started out calling it the first thing that we called it for the first couple of years was surviving the cut. And it was just like cutting fat off your body, right? We would just help men lose weight. And you probably started the same way. It's like Google Sheets and just the most rudimentary, difficult, Facebook group with Google Sheets and like them having to put their it was just an operational nightmare. But that's how we started, man. We got it done. And nonetheless, we started running with that. It was mildly successful, but we loved it. We loved building the community. We loved getting the men together. They were calling for it. They needed it. And then 2020 happened. And one of the things that happened with me in 2020, I don't know if you found it, was I had a public gym. That was one of my businesses, and it got raided by the cops. Now we did shut down. Before anybody loses their mind, we shut down for like 2 or 3 weeks. But then the governor came out. It was supposed to be, I don't know if you remember, the initial thing was a 2-week shutdown.
Oh, no, I don't. I feel like, dude, over here in Washington, gyms shut down. Well, some of them indefinitely because they went out of business, but some of them for months and months and months. And I have a buddy that he just didn't. And he actually grew through it because a lot of police officers were like, I'm going to go there because I need to train. But
yeah, Greg Anderson didn't ever shut down either.
So he is in Washington, and my nephew actually is one of his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu students up there.
Awesome. Yeah. Great dude.
Yeah.
And so we shut down for 2 weeks, and then not knowing what we didn't know what we didn't know, and then the governor came back out, and he just was like, he just tore the state apart. Like he destroyed the state. And I'm like, wait a minute, there's no information. We're just supposed to stay closed. And I'm glad we didn't, because hindsight, California gyms opened before North Carolina gyms. We were one of the last states in the entire.
Really?
Yes. Strip clubs were open here. Gyms were shut down.
That makes sense.
So 3 weeks in, guys were hitting me up. My employees have I got to pay bills. My employees have to have as their own personal rents due. I got to get them paid. People are hitting me up saying, Nick, I got to come to the gym. We live at the time, there was 2,500 people in this town. We live in such a small little beach town. There's nobody here. There wasn't one case of COVID. Nothing was happening. Like, we're so small. And anyways, so I looked at the CDC guidelines. Bedros Keuilian, who is the owner of Fit Body Boot Camp, he's a friend of mine. I was coaching with him. He put out this great pandemic, hey, this is how we're running our gyms. I was like, I'll just copy that in the CDC guidelines, and we did. And then we got raided by the cops. Stupid raided. And that, of course, made national news and Fox, and I went on that. But then I started to realize, I'm like, how could this happen? It was like Rambo. I was like John Rambo, First Blood. They raided my gym. You didn't know my political, religious, or any affiliation. I was making videos on YouTube. I was just having fun. I had long hair. I was skateboarding, surfing all the time, and I was just a fun time guy. And I wasn't really stressing things. I'm like, you want to lose weight? You should. Let's go. But it wasn't like I wasn't the guy that I am now that just hammers the system all the time, right? And just pushes back on everything. And when this happened, I'm like, how can I serve my country for as long as I did and have my rights taken away from me? The right to earn, the right of prosperity, the right of all these different things, and these unconstitutional like shutdowns. And I'll go to my grave saying all this. Like, it was wrong. It was wrong. And I started looking at them like, how did we get here? How the hell did we get here? And I went back to, and everything I landed on was men. Men became fat, sick, dependent, distracted. And if men were the men they were 30, 40 years ago, there's no way in hell this would have happened. They could have tried, but the men in the community would have been like, whoa, 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 this is not in the best interest of our kids, our families, our community, and our business, our local businesses. Right. So we're going to find a different way. I get that there's something going on here, but you're not shutting our world off. You're not taking my kids and putting them through like the stuff they did with kids during that time. There are young adults now that are in their early 18, 19, 20, 22 that were part of that TikTok world that are still suffering mentally because of what they were put through. And if I would have looked at got men like Martin Luther King, like those type of men, would that have happened? If we had those type of men that were not afraid to stand up to a tyrannical government as a community, not just one man, but all men in the nation, united for your family, for your local businesses, for your community, it wouldn't have came out that way. But they systematically, slowly eroded masculinity, made us fat, sick, dependent, distracted, lose touch with God, pornography, gambling, alcohol, tobacco, drugs, whatever it may be. Could take over a whole country without firing a shot. And, and I looked at it, I started seeing America through the lens of my asymmetrical warfare. I'm like, oh, I see what they did here. If I want to take over a country, I don't worry about women. I don't worry about children. I don't worry about the elderly. I worry about military-age males. And if I can make them fat, sick, and dependent and distracted, I can take over an entire country without firing a single shot. And that's exactly what they did. And that's when my focus turned towards men and poking them in the chest. And I was like, you're the problem. You're the real pandemic. Men are the real pandemic of this nation. But they're also the solution.
Yeah. And you came up with a way to help them, obviously. Yeah. We're both very passionate about this, but I love how you have these 4 phases. And it's kind of parallel to some of the stuff I talk about on here. I actually just did a podcast. It was about morning routines, but it covers 4 pillars. And the whole point of that is there's a lot of ways to do it. I talked about health, head, heart, hustle. You can say faith, family, fitness, finance. There's a million ways to body, balance, business, core 4. There's so many different ways. And you have
it all is basically the same.
It is. There's 4 things that we need to focus on. And I love that you, instead of having pillars, the pillars are ingrained in this, but you have 4 phases that you take guys through, which is a really cool way of doing it. You have master yourself, lead your family, master your finances, and build your legacy. So can you kind of just briefly go through what that means for the guy listening so that they know
absolutely
what they need to do?
Bedros says this thing that fitness is a gateway drug to success.
Yeah, I love that.
Because you and I both know it is. You get a guy that's totally wrecked, and you get him physically fit. His whole life is going to change.
Yeah.
And it's not because he's physically fit. It's the work and the habits that he had to instill to turn his life around and become physically fit. And so when we talk about the reason why phase 1 is mastering yourself, and phase 1, I could send this to you. I can send you the breakdown of each phase. But phase 1 is it's not just physical fitness. It's your identity. It's your core values. And the reason why we have to master ourselves is we used to do this. We used to run these. Do you ever run 30-day challenges?
Yeah.
Yeah. I hate them. I absolutely hate
We're
them.
not big on challenges either. We don't do, we've done different challenges within our members.
Yeah.
Funny enough, we actually just did our first ever like public challenge that people paid for. It was 8 weeks, so it's longer than 30 days.
Yeah.
But I'm not a huge challenge guy.
Because we know it's going to happen, right? Like they're going to do the challenge and then they're just going to go back. Like 90% of them are just going to go right back to what they were doing because we didn't actually instill any true habits. It's like, oh, I'm just doing this challenge like mentally.
Yeah. It's great if you can get people who have been on the fence and not taking action on their goals.
It's a great business. It's a great business marketing thing to bring them initially in. And then, you know, I don't know about you, but we saw about a 10% conversion of people who stuck around.
Right.
Yeah. And then we'd have these people that would just wait for the next challenge and then jump on the next challenge and they'd gain all the weight back. I'm like, why are we doing this? Can we? Anyways, so we started doing these things and these guys would come in there and be like, all right, I got my macros. And they would be like, all right, they'd be trying to clean out the pantry of the house. And like the whole family's now on macros. And the family's like, dude, I just saw you eating Cheetos out of your belly button last night on the couch watching Netflix off your gut. Like, who are you? What are you talking about? And so we would see a lot of rub. And I'm like, well, yeah, dude, they don't believe you. You're full of And so the whole purpose of this is there's a difference between your perceived identity and your actual true identity. Right? Like what we show people versus how people perceive us.
Yeah.
And you can say whatever you want to say, but the reality is people look at you a certain way based off your habits and the way that you show up.
Right.
So for us to be taken seriously, if we really want to turn our life around, we have to own our own. We have to master ourselves first. This isn't about your wife. This isn't about your kids. This isn't about your family. It's not about anything else but you and the internal work that's going on. The reality is this: 1 in 4 men have been sexually abused. 1 in 3 men have been physically abused. And that is a statistic that stays true to this day. And I can get 20 men in a room, and if I get them to open up, that statistic will stay 100% true. How many men openly talk about that? This is the stuff that's causing them this trauma that they've never dealt with, and maybe some of them don't even remember, is why they yin yang. It's why they can't stay consistent. It's because something in their life is wrong, and then we have to master it. We have to master that. We have to deal with it. We have to process it. We have to get healthy and move past it. And that's when all the other things will happen. And the reason why, like, why I need to get my finances in order. Bro, you're never going to get your finances in order. If you don't have the discipline to put the cookie down, what makes you think that you're going to save 10% of your monthly income? You're not. Discipline there is discipline there. That's the way it works. So that's the reason why. And there's a lot of things of like having your family on board, your wife coming on board. So we want to show our family who we are as men. We want to show them what we're capable of, not through what we say, but through our actions and through our results. Now, when that happens, now we can enter the conversation of, hey, this is what I would like to do with our family. Why? Because now we've built trust. Dad's gotten results. Whatever's working for dad, he shows up differently. He communicates differently. He's a different father. He's a different husband. Now that's somebody that I can follow, right? Most men are not leading. They're just existing in their household. But when you can truly master yourself, something happens to you, I think on a very spiritual level, that you become the man that you were created to be. I think men were created by God to lead and to live with purpose. And when you start to master yourself, you start to fulfill that purpose, and people will see you in that light. And it's only then that we can then lead our family, that we can have the relationship with our wife about nutrition, that we can have about our core values, that we can create a family plan, because it's not just me talking. I'm already living it on my own. And that's when we started seeing big changes in our community. Now, then not only that, and guys, I understand this is difficult. This doesn't happen overnight. This is a takes months and years to flow through. But then once we lead the family and we get the family on board, and you and your wife are in step with each other and synced up, well, now I can do things in my finances because I can be on the same page with my wife, right? But if I'm like, hey, we're just gonna do all of this, she's like, oh, and you gotta stop going to that Starbucks every day. You know what I mean? Like, that's not gonna fly. Like, you guys have to be symbiotic of each other. But that starts with you. And then we get into, once you've mastered yourself, and then now we have the reputation to lead our family, the expectation that in the results that I do want to follow Dad because of the way he communicates, the fact that he's stoic, that he's patient, that he's a teacher, that he's communicating. He's not saying because, you know what I mean? He's being an intentional father. Well, then we can get into finances, start turning our whole life around our finances. And then phase 4 is really about the legacy. It's like, okay, well, now you've achieved the pinnacle of what you're supposed to be. You're becoming almost like the elder of your family. And now it's time to not only protect the wealth that you've created and, dynasty trust, high value cash, life insurance, things like that. But it's also in that phase we discuss you now as a leader need to start creating more leaders. How to do that. And the reality is most men are waiting for permission to do so when they can start today.
Yeah.
And so we go through this whole 10 lesson course. So it's very educational. It's about, 10 to 15 videos per phase with worksheets and everything that we've, so it's, I felt like we needed a very heavy educational platform. Something tangible. I don't like this like, well, you're just going to give it to God. What does that mean? Yeah. What does it really mean? Like men we are tactical creatures. We need executable tactical things that we can take care of. Yes, it can be spiritual. It can have to do with God, but I loved the guy who runs our faith portion of the Agoge. It's called Men of Faithful Action. He goes, God won't drive a parked car.
That's good.
Right? I'm like, he's not going to drive a parked car, gentlemen. Like, you got to put it in drive. You know what I mean? You got to do the work. You got to show up and you got to get your hands dirty and you got to do the work. And so that's what we're really focused on is the tangible, tactical things that we can execute on, not just hyperbole.
God won't do what you can do yourself. I've heard
Yeah.
a great pastor say multiple times. So it's like, there's still work involved. We still got to do the work, and we can have faith in God, and especially in guiding us in the right direction, but he's not going to do what you can do for yourself.
That's why we're...
Goes back to what we were talking about kids. I'm not going to do what you can do for yourself because that won't teach you anything in the process.
That's right. We're literally built with this physique to be able to endure stress and work.
Yeah.
It's what we're built for.
Yeah. So good, man. Dude, I could literally talk about just those 4 phases with you probably for another couple hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're at the hour mark, so I'm going to wrap it up here. And I just have one final question for you before we close it out. And that's just, what does choose hard mean to you?
Oh, man. That is keeping the evil away. Choosing hard over easy is delaying gratification for a bigger reward in the future. And that could be physically, financially, relationship with my wife, my kids, everything. But having that battle with choosing easy first and over choosing hard, I know the road that takes you down, and I don't ever want to go down that road again. I literally have a shirt that we wear that says, choose hard over easy.
I love it.
And,
I love it, dude.
And is it, matter of fact,
yes. Wallpaper on your phone. I love it, man.
I stare at it every single day, man. It's a mantra. It's a way to live, because I know that a true life of happiness is when you choose hard over easy. That's when you're truly fulfilled. That's where you get the accomplishments, the dopamine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good. Well, dude, thank you so much for taking the time with me today. This has been phenomenal. I love these kind of conversations. More and more people need to hear these kind of conversations. So I'm really grateful that you could come on, and I'm honored to have you on the podcast to share your story and hopefully open up some more eyes. Tell everybody where they can find you on Instagram. I know you have a bunch of places and things that you're doing, so all of it is listed on your Instagram, but just give them your Instagram handle so I can put that and everything else in the description.
Yeah, and that's where I actually engage the most. So I'm able to actually talk to people the most. It's just easy for me to talk to people through Instagram. So it's Nick Koumalatsos. Good luck.
Yeah.
Nick Kou on Instagram. And then my website. All of my stuff is on my website. Love you guys. Appreciate you, Cody.
Man. Yeah, absolutely. I'll put that in the description of this podcast. Go give him a follow. Listen to his podcast. He's got a lot of great content. If you like this, you'll like everything else he does. So I'll put that in the description. Thank you guys for listening. We'll catch you next time.